How are we doing? We doing all
Hello.
right? Okay. One second. Hello there. You are listening to Areva Martin in real time. How's everybody doing? Happy Thursday. Uh, I am Dr. Nicola Corte filling in for Areva Martin in real time. And we have quite the headlines for you today. There's a lot happening in the news, and we've got you covered. More than $1 billion worth of shoulder fired missiles, kamikaze drones, and night vision devices that the United States has sent to Ukraine have not been properly tracked by American officials. A new Pentagon report concludes all of this, raising concerns that they could be stolen or smuggled at a time Congress is debating whether to send more military aid to Kiev. The report by the Defense Department's Inspector General, released on Thursday, offers no evidence that any of the weapons have been misused after being shipped to a military logistics hub in Poland or sent onward to Ukraine's battlefields. In other news, the former New Jersey governor, Chris Christie's decision on Wednesday to drop out of the presidential race shook up a contest for the Republican nomination that had appeared to be former President Donald Trump's for the taking, giving a huge shot of adrenaline to Nikki Haley just 5 days before ballots begin to be cast in the months long nomination fight. The most obviously altered battleground is likely to be New Hampshire, where Ms. Haley, the former governor of South Carolina and Mr. Trump's first ambassador to the United Nations, is within striking distance of the former president. Then in South Africa today, they were making the case that Israel is acting with, quote, genocidal intent in Gaza, citing as evidence the words of Israeli officials, including Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who said that Israel would impose a complete siege on the territory because it was fighting, quotes, human animals. That's what he said. On the first day of a 2-day hearing at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, South African representatives said that they said in the statement of Israeli officials like Mr. Gallant communicated the intent to commit genocide. Israel categorically denies the genocide accusation and will present its defense on Friday. Speaking of defense, Donald J. Trump's civil fraud trial enters its final phase today as each side presents closing arguments in a case that has enraged the former president and threatens his family business. Lawyers for the New York Attorney General, who sued Mr. Trump in 2022, will argue that the former president violated state laws by seriously exaggerating his net worth in obtaining favorable loans. The accusation strikes at the heart of Mr. Trump's presentation of himself as a real estate visionary and has made the Attorney General, Letitia James, one of his chief antagonists. Conservatives thrust the House back into chaos on Wednesday, grinding business to a halt in protest of the spending deal that Speaker Mike Johnson struck with Democrats to avert a government shutdown and leaving the funding package in limbo. A dozen hardline Republicans defected from the party line to tank a routine procedural measure blocking consideration of a pair of GOP bills that amounted to warning shots by members of the ultra-conservative Freedom Caucus that they would not stand for the agreement. Now, as the measure failed, members of the group can be seen in animated discussion with Mr. Johnson and his deputies on the House floor. And so we'll see what happens there. The rabble rousers in the House, particularly the House Republicans, don't they stay busy? Moving along, Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, they traded some pretty harsh attacks at Wednesday night's debate just ahead of the Iowa caucus, battling for second place while former President Donald Trump, the runaway favorite to win, skipped the event and held his own town hall. Wednesday's debate, hosted by CNN at Drake University, was the first to feature just Haley and DeSantis, and they assailed each other's trustworthiness, competence, and commitment to top issues for conservatives. Throughout the debate, Haley took aim at the turmoil that has roiled DeSantis' beleaguered operation, declaring, quotes, "If you can't manage a campaign, how are you going to manage the country?" And later calling him, quotes, "desperate." DeSantis accused Haley of offering voters, quotes, "warmed over corporatism," and said, quotes, "We don't need another mealy-mouthed politician who just tells you what she thinks you want to hear." And the House majority is kicking off the new year by aggressively advancing existing impeachment inquiries into President Joe Biden and Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Now, Republican lawmakers are launching new threats to impeach Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Attorney General Merrick Garland as well. All of the House impeachment talks is overkill for even some Senate Republicans who say they're focused on more important things like averting a government shutdown this month, beefing up border security, and providing additional aid to Ukraine and Israel. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time, and I am your guest host filling in for Areva Martin. This is your one-stop shop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and unfiltered opinions. In this hour, we will be joined by some pretty incredible guests. Dr. Niambi Carter, author and professor over at the University of Maryland, will be joining us. We'll also be joined by Dr. Calvin John Smiley. He's author of the really celebrated book, Purgatory Citizenship, Reentry, Race, and Abolition. And in hour or two, you'll know what we need to. In hour two, you'll know that we'll be going deeper into the headlines. We'll be digging beyond the headlines and bringing those stories that people are talking about today. More specifically, the GOP presidential debate. And it's also award season. Award season has already begun, and for many, it's their favorite time of year. Celebrities, artists, filmmakers, and producers come together in one place to receive new accolades. We're going to be talking about all of that and more. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time. More when we come forward.
So, what are you doing this Friday morning? How about you come join the KBLA delegation as we make a historic announcement and unveil our climate justice campaign for 2024. You'll be assembled for this major press conference along with LA Mayor Karen Bass, Ben Jealous, Executive Director of the Sierra Club, and a host of other public and private leaders who are joining us on this journey to justice, climate justice. We can't think of a better way to kick off the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend, linking social justice and climate justice. So, come join us this Friday morning at 10:30 a.m. at the beautiful MLK Memorial Tree Grove at the top of Kenneth Hahn Park off La Cienega. Once again, that's this Friday morning, January 12th at 10:30 a.m. as we take on the task of elevating the climate conversation by amplifying the voices of those who are most impacted by the climate catastrophes we are all witnessing in real time. KBLA delegation, we hope to see you this Friday morning at KBLA Talk 1580. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king.
Are you a landlord in LA County with unpaid rent expenses? This is your last chance to apply for the Los Angeles County Rent Relief Program. This program is available to landlords with unpaid rent expenses in Los Angeles County, excluding the city of Los Angeles. If you are a landlord with unpaid rent, you could be eligible for a grant of up to $30,000 per unit. Tenants with unpaid rent are also welcome to refer their landlords to apply for this program. To learn more about the program or to apply, visit www.lacountyrentrelief.com. The application deadline is January 12th, 2024. Submit your application before it's too late. This program is administered by the Los Angeles County Department of Consumer and Business Affairs.
Okay, I have to admit, 2024 really snuck up on me. Luckily, Kohl's has everything my family needs to start the new year out right. With the 15% off going on, I got my husband and I flex styles under 30 bucks.
You're listening to Areva Martin in Real Time. I'm Dr. Nicolai Corte filling in for Areva. Good afternoon, everybody. Really delighted to welcome some pretty extraordinary guests that are no stranger to Areva Martin in Real Time. I want to welcome Dr. Niambi Carter. She is an author and professor over at the University of Maryland. We love professors here. And Dr. Calvin John Smiley, author of Purgatory Citizenship, Reentry, Race, and Abolition. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so first things first, let's get into that GOP presidential debate. I mean, who would have ever thought, we'd be left with Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis with former President Trump just sort of phoning it in. I'll start with you, Dr. Carter. What was your big takeaway, if there was one, from the GOP presidential debate last night?
Well, clearly, I think Nikki Haley, for the first time, seems to be feeling herself, right? If we use that term. I mean, she certainly has a shot in the arm with Chris Christie announcing that he's going to step away from the race. Ron DeSantis has been rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic for months now. I mean, he had a lot of money and a lot of wind at his back when he came into this cycle. But I mean, he is sort of squandered, I think, mentioned those opportunities. And I think Nikki Haley, quite frankly, last night, I mean, she was holding no punches. I mean, she was talking about policy. She talked about the fact that Ron DeSantis has squandered those many dollars that he had instead and spent it on private jets rather than trying to win a race. And let's be clear, DeSantis did himself no favors last night. I mean, Nikki Haley didn't have to work hard to make him look bad. I mean, he's been talking about nothing, right? Substantive for months. And when they asked him like a softball question, are you going to do the flat tax? What does he say? Well, it depends on if we're solving or not. That's not a policy, right? So I think he appeared vapid, wooden, lost, and really punching above his weight class last night. So, I mean, kudos to Nikki Haley, I guess. I mean, she was the one that came out as a clear front runner last night.
But if you are debating somebody who, to your point, Dr. Carter, is vapid and wooden, I'm not sure if the bar is too high. I want to bring Dr. Smiley into the conversation. What were some of your big takeaways from last night's debate?
The carnival continues. The mudslinging and the kind of coming at each other is still the kind of textbook Trumpism that we've seen over the last several debates. I was a little bit disappointed, jokingly, that Ramaswamy's not there anymore, right? Because he was really the animated character. But I think Dr. Carter hit it out of the park here. DeSantis really does not have the same kind of robust, you know, character, I'll say, that Trump has, in order to kind of carry a kind of national stage. And I think also something else that Nikki Haley also has in this kind of sector of the primary is that, you know, she fills a lot of boxes that I think the GOP wants to try to win over, right? So she's a woman of color, she's conservative, right? She kind of becomes a little bit of a unicorn if there is a way to kind of pull some of the DEI votes away. Not saying that she will, but I think for now that's what they're seeing it. You know, the real question will be if she can kind of maintain that same type of hold no punches when she is in the ring with the, dare I say, heavyweight Donald Trump.
And let me add on to that. The bar is in hell, right? Like this is not you know, this is
Dr. Carter, where is it?
It's in hell. But I do think, to my colleague's point, though, I mean, in terms of how they look head to head coming in, they were equally matched. Both have been governors. Yes, she has some international kind of foreign policy experience because she was the ambassador to the UN, but in a lot of ways, they looked very similar. But not only that, you know, she's a woman, she's from the South. I mean, there are lots of things that are happening for Nikki Haley that I think will make people give her a second look, where 6 months ago, people were saying this is almost, you know, certainly going to be Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump kind of duking it out at the end. And here we see DeSantis has become a very, very quick memory for many GOP voters who were looking for a Trump alternative. Trump like.
And to your point, I mean, you know, how much of this is just a charade? You know, I mean, we know that Trump is leading in the polls among GOP voters, yet and still, he's caught case after case after case. Today, you know, we heard that there were closing arguments in the New York fraud case, and even in light of, you know, the litigation, the mounting litigation that he's facing, the mounting sort of legal questions pending around whether or not, you know, it's legal for states to take Trump off the ballot based on the 14th Amendment, the insurrection clause. Yet and still, you know, he's leading in the polls. And I just wonder how much of these exchanges we've seen on the debate stage that have largely excluded, they've totally excluded Trump, you know, are you know, just sort of an infomercial for a Republican Party that just doesn't exist.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you start.
I was going to say, you know, from the larger kind of field in the beginning, you know, and this happens across, you know, all primaries, is that there are folks who are there for the show, there are folks who are there who think of themselves as legitimate candidates, and then there are folks who are there who are looking for a job. And so, you know, if Trump does happen to get the nomination, which it's looking like, and he's able to run, you know, there could be a VP Nikki Haley. You know, she has not really bucked the ring, as we'll say, in the ways that, say, Chris Christie had. So, you know, there is some still strategizing on their part. I think Trump can still kind of use his power and position as someone who could say, I made both of these people, right? If it even gets closer, to kind of, again, remind the base who's in charge. And, you know, I think it's really his for the losing. And in these cases, the arrogance that he continues to show as these cases continue to mount against him, but really seeing them as more of a distraction to his larger goal, right? That these aren't legitimate cases, right? He still doesn't see the sense of that that he's, you know, potentially broken the law across various states and in the feds.
Or he sees it and just doesn't care. I mean, you know, look, Trumpism is really the big victor. You know, whether it is perpetuated by former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley or Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, you know, Trumpism continues in one form or another. You know, and there seems to be really no difference in policy position. Because each and every one of the policies that they have cited are largely steeped in Trumpism. No, Dr. Carter?
Absolutely. I mean, look, Trump has remade this party. I don't even know if we can call it a political party anymore. It operates almost like a cult of personality at this point. I mean, the fact that he has everyone, I would say, save Chris Christie, sort of parroting the same lines about the same things over and over again. I mean, even people with 91 indictments, no, none of these people, again, except for like Chris Christie and maybe one or two other footnote candidates, has said he has to go, that he's dangerous for democracy, that he's a problem, right? That he does not represent real Republican values because there is winning at the end of Trumpism, right? If Trumpism didn't work and it wasn't a strategy, these people would have abandoned him and it a long time ago. And even in the face of people going to prison, right, behind January 6th, people are still going to prison, still being convicted. The fact that this man has not been convicted yet, but may very well be convicted. I mean, the fact that we have listened to his attorneys say that essentially he can do whatever he wants and be an imperial president, which is everything opposite what the founders wanted, unless he's impeached, tells us everything we need to know about Donald Trump and this party, because you still have people saying things like, well, we would pardon him, right? I mean, that's Vivek Ramaswamy said, I would pardon him if he was convicted. You have other people saying, well, the jury's still out. Well, this is a witch hunt. People still denying elections. The members of our Congress are probably more dangerous than those people on that stage because those are the people that make legislation. And many of the GOP in Congress are election deniers right now. So I think this whole thing about Trumpism being here to stay. Now, Trumpism is here. I don't know if the Republican Party will be. That's another thing that we have to talk about, because engaging this sort of iteration of what we call republicanism right now is, I don't think, real politics at work, because it's not about policy, it's about grievance.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's a slightly different animal.
It's true. And from Trumpism to Christieism, the former New Jersey governor made the decision just yesterday to drop out of the presidential race. They say he shook up the contest. He had trouble getting traction, so I don't know how much of a shakeup to the contest that is. But we saw the former governor willing to say the quiet part out loud about former President Trump. Say the quiet part out loud about his fellow contenders. And we know that the No Labels organization has reportedly, been sort of courting Chris Christie, in the early stages of courting Chris Christie to potentially run as a third party candidate. How much of this is just routine political chatter versus an idea that really could gain some traction and do some damage to Democrats' hope of holding on to the White House, Dr. Smiley?
Well, I think the first thing that Chris Christie needs to look into is, does this, what outweighs the benefits and costs? Does he go back to ABC and talk with George Stephanopoulos, or does he get back on the campaign trail? If I was him, I would get back on in the news, because he seemed to, thrive in that realm as kind of being the kind of conservative voice. But to your question, I'm not really sure if he shakes up the Democrats or the Republicans in the sense of who he siphons off more of. Certainly he would siphon off some of the more moderate conservatives, but he could also siphon off some more of the more conservative Democrats too. And at the end of the day, it could be all a bust. And as we see, people are going more and more into their extremes of their party. And so he also could become a footnote himself. The fact that he lasted as long as he did might be a kind of glimmer in the Republicanism eye that maybe at some point they can figure out how to overcome Trumpism or detach themselves from Trumpism. But I think, as we've already mentioned so far, is that right now the Republican Party is Trumpism, and so it will be a lot of will and power to kind of overcome that if Christie decides to stay in this kind of sitting on the fence.
And now I think part of what makes this conversation unique is we're all professors. I teach at Pepperdine University. We have University of Maryland represented here, and I think Columbia represented here.
Hunter College, CUNY,
Hunter College.
City
That's right.
University of New
That's
York.
right. That's right. Shout out to all the Hunter alumni that are tuning in. And so I've got to ask you both, in the remaining minute or so, starting with you, Dr. Carter, what are you hearing from some of your students that have been engaged or are just beginning to engage in the 2024 election cycle? What's sort of the big idea that you're hearing from your students?
Well, on the policy, and I think a lot of them are very concerned about what their futures mean. I mean, they're in college ostensibly to get this higher education that's going to be making them more employable, but for what? A lot of them don't expect to be able to buy a house. Some of them don't expect to be able to afford children and a family if they want those kinds of things. So I think there's a lot of disillusionment with what the future is going to be because their future is not going to look like our future or our grandparents. I mean, usually it's like every generation gets better. And I think this is a generation that is saying, I don't know if I'm going to be able to move out of my mom's basement. On the political end, though, I do see a lot of engagement. Contrary to this notion that young people are apathetic and disaffected, I think these people know what's at stake. They're looking at the abortion bans and being afraid. They're thinking about where they can live as LGBTQIA plus individuals and what kind of family units they can put together, whether they're going to be safe from prosecution for loving who they want to love. So my students are really paying attention to these issues that would seem to be sort of far off for them because there probably won't be Social Security in their lifetime. So they have to think about all of this stuff. But then there is a sense that these parties are not up to the task. I think for many students, whether conservative or more progressive or liberal, whatever you want to call them, they are really bothered by the two-party dominant system and the alternatives that they have. And fear does not appear to be a driver for them in the same way. It's healthy. They have an appreciation for what can go wrong with this thing that we call democracy and its fragility. They've seen it multiple times, but they are also not certain that this model is working.
Mhm. Well, when we come forward, I want to hear, Dr. Smiley's take on the big idea he's gleaning from some of his students at Hunter College as the 2024 election cycle heats up. We know we heard former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley talk about raising the retirement age, something that would directly impact Gen Z. Not sure if Dr. Smiley has heard anything about that, but we're going to find out when we come forward. That and more. You're listening to Areva Martin in Real Time. I'm guest host, Dr. Nicordelai Corte, in for Areva, and you're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
The right time. More of Areva Martin in Real Time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. The top Democrat in the House says democracy is on the ballot in 2024. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries told reporters Americans should be terrified Donald Trump appears to be the Republican frontrunner for president. Jeffries, who is Black, went on to criticize House Republicans, saying the most unproductive Congress in history is being presided over by who he called extreme MAGA Republicans. This comes amid Republican infighting over spending in the House. The U.S. Supreme Court is rejecting an appeal of an ex-Minneapolis police officer convicted of violating George Floyd's civil rights in 2020. Tutau was found guilty on 2 counts of depriving Floyd's rights under color of law. The defendant was accused of failing to intervene in former officer Derek Chauvin's use of unreasonable force. He was also accused of being deliberately indifferent to Floyd's medical needs while Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network.
Stop traffic in Santa Fe Springs continues back on the 605 South after the 5 Santa Ana Freeway as a crash remains in the carpool in left lane, and stop traffic continues now from Rose Hill Road over an hour. City of Industry has some heavy traffic over 20 minutes from Indiana on the 60 East before the 605 as a stall is blocking the second lane from the left. Pasadena's 210 East before the 134 West has a crash on the right shoulder and slight heavy traffic forming from the Mountains Street, Seco Street interchange.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice: continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
There are now 8 openings for head coaching jobs in the NFL. That number could grow if certain teams fail to get past the first round of the playoffs. The vacancies rose to 8 when the New England Patriots reached a mutual agreement to move on from Bill Belichick after 24 years and 6 Super Bowl championships. We're in another offseason where the NFL will be on notice to show how serious the league is about diversity. Only 3 of the NFL's 32 teams have a black head coach. This could be a defining offseason for the NFL. It will be very hard for the NFL to defend its push for diversity if the league doesn't have more than 3 black head coaches next season. Here are the teams to keep an eye on who are looking for a coach: the Chargers, the Raiders, New England, Atlanta, Tennessee, Washington, Seattle, and Carolina. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
So, what are you doing this Friday morning? How about you come join the KBLA delegation as we make a historic announcement and unveil our climate justice campaign for 2024. You'll be assembled for this major press conference along with LA Mayor Karen Bass, Ben Jealous, Executive Director of the Sierra Club, and a host of other public and private leaders who are joining us on this journey to justice, climate justice. We can't think of a better way to kick off the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend, linking social justice and climate justice. So, come join us this Friday morning at 10:30 a.m. at the beautiful MLK Memorial Tree Grove at the top of Kenneth Hahn Park off La Cienega. Once again, that's this Friday morning, January 12th at 10:30 a.m. as we take on the task of elevating the climate conversation by amplifying the voices of those who are most impacted by the climate catastrophes we are all witnessing in real time. KBLA delegation, we hope to see you this Friday morning at KBLA Talk 1580. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king. KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Stay Housed LA has the resources you need to know your rights and the legal support to back them up. The COVID-19 pandemic has cost people their jobs and livelihoods. This has left an estimated 1/3 of households not being able to make rent and facing losing their homes. This is a fear no one in our community should have to face. You have rights, though, and Stay Housed LA is here to help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, and local community and legal service providers. Together, they provide tenants with the information and support needed to exercise their rights so they can remain safely in their homes. Find out more about your rights by participating in a virtual tenant workshop. Get the legal assistance you need. Find additional resources in Los Angeles County and the City of Los Angeles. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA County for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. That's stayhousedla.org. Or call their hotline at 213-694-0040. We've got your black with a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. The president.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte filling in for Areva, and I'm in the best of company. Please welcome Dr. Niambi Carter and Dr. Smiley. Just 3 professors, 3 Black professors, here being unapologetically Black, unapologetically progressive, going beyond the headlines and providing you with a little deeper analysis. That's all for a Thursday. Is that all right? I am Really delighted to be here with both of you. And before we went to break, I was asking, what's sort of the big idea or sort of the big insight that you've gleaned thus far from some of your students as the 2024 election cycle is warming up. Dr. Smiley, what are you hearing from your students over at Hunter College?
Yeah, so having the break, it really gave me some time to really think about the question more deeply. And Hunter is part of the City University of New York, which is the largest urban university system in the country. And so, just kind of complimenting Dr. Carter's statements about students. Many of my students are native New York City residents or first generation Americans. And so, while her students are having conversations about can they buy or afford a home, many of my students are asking, can I afford rent? So the kind of this debate between rent and buy is not even there. And so the idea of getting out of their mama's basement, it's more like, can I get off my mama's couch? And so we really see this really big issue with housing disparities and wealth gaps that many of my students are experiencing. But one of the things that I really love about CUNY students in general and Hunter students specifically is that they're very active students. They hold no punches, very politically engaged at the local, national, even the international level, and they'll hold public officials' feet to the fire. So, we have a mayor, Eric Adams, who has cut literally every budget in the city for the exception of cops. So, there's been a lot of criticisms of Mayor Adams. And when it comes to the national election, there's a huge pessimism in the air. In both parties, the leading candidates are two old white guys, and that's not to be ageist, but the facts are the facts, right? We have two white men who are simply out of touch with many of millennial and Gen Z issues, cultural values, etc. And and what are we voting for? On one hand, we have a guy who was involved in an insurrection, and on the other hand, we have a guy who's supporting a genocide. And so, how is this truly a democratic option? And so, we really have to figure out a way. And I think, the optimism is that younger generations are trying to figure out a way of how do we break up this monopoly of what we call democracy? Because what we see now, especially at the national level, is that anyone with $1 billion who can raise $1 billion is who is running for president. The fact that we have people like Mark Cuban who's toyed around with it, or The Rock who's toyed around with running for president. And again, this is not me bashing them, but just because you have that money does not mean you have the credibility, the wherewithal, or the knowledge on how to run, the United States or any other country. But that's where we are with our politics, is that it's pay to play, and we really need to figure out a way how to undo this system.
Speaking of where we're at in our politics, I mentioned earlier that South Africa today made its case that Israel is acting with, quotes, genocidal intent in Gaza, citing as evidence the words of Israeli officials, including Defense Minister Gallant, who said that Israel would impose a complete siege on the territory because it was fighting, quotes, human animals. This is, sort of the latest in what has been an ongoing challenge, both here at home and abroad. There are lots of folks out there who have been organizing, calling for a ceasefire. You might remember earlier this week, President Biden had visited Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina, and maybe about 8 minutes, maybe a little bit before 8 minutes into that speech, there were a number of peaceful protesters that got up and interrupted him and called for a ceasefire. And so the energy around this issue doesn't seem to have dissipated at all, particularly when it comes to young people, particularly when it comes to college campuses. Dr. Carter, what do you make of this latest move by leaders in South Africa?
Well, look, I mean, I think this is, the international community of folks that are party, right, to the International Criminal Court, because the United States is not, right? So they can do all the hearings that they want, but nothing will happen to the United States, for example. Um, but, this body doesn't have a lot of means to enforce. But I do think it sends a very strong signal when you have a nation, not just like South Africa, but the others that are hearing the case at The Hague, that are offering these kind of approbations against a country like Israel, which is relatively small but very powerful, not just as a symbol, but as a space for a group of people that many remember primarily because of this awful genocide against that community. And so it's been very difficult to mount criticisms of Israel. And I think when you look at a place like a South Africa, which I think many will argue politically does not have the same esteem as an Israel in the world, to take a stand and to say something. I think it is really powerful. I know Israel has already essentially said that, this is sort of grandstanding and virtue signaling on the part of South Africa. I think others have suggested that, South Africa should be worried about the Sudan, right, which is also experiencing great amounts of violence as other places on the continent, which, I don't think those are legitimate critiques. But the fact that that South Africa would say something recognizing the far, I guess, stronger position that Israel holds, I do think is important. And when we look at the protests that are happening, whether in New York or other places that are not really getting the coverage, I think it makes it seem like there's no story here, or that there is no, like I said, larger momentum happening around this issue. But I think we're seeing in real time sort of Israel eat away at its own international goodwill by continuing to be so aggressive in Gaza.
Dr. Smiley, I want to bring you into this conversation here, and maybe even take it a step further. I just mentioned what happened at Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina earlier this week. Now, towards the end of the week, we see this move before the International Court by South Africa. Is there a narrative that exists, or a narrative that is emerging, that centers the voices of Black folks across the diaspora in response to what is happening in Israel and Gaza right now, that we are not hearing enough on, mainstream news outlets?
Absolutely. When we think about the liberation of Palestine, these protests do not happen in a vacuum. I think for many, there's this kind of narrative that's been kind of implicitly being said that prior to October 7th, Israel was this land of utopia, and that simply is not the case, right? That the dispossession of land, the apartheid that's been happening since 1948 is ongoing. And we see that places like South Africa and the late, great Nelson Mandela and other countries, particularly like Cuba, who support Palestinian liberation, and organizations within the United States, like the Black Panthers, who are in full support of Palestinian liberation, it has been there. And even if you're not, quote unquote, a radical in the examples that I just gave, there is a long legacy within Black struggle that calls for peace, that calls for not bombing children, for not bombing hospitals, for not attacking refugee camps. And Israel cannot continue to say or use the excuse, yeah, but we think Hamas is there, or that is Hamas, because it continues to erode, as Dr. Carter said, their image. But I think one thing that's really powerful and important about this international court hearing is that this now holds the receipts in a very real and open way. Israel has often operated under the guise of propaganda, but now that propaganda is going to be stifled, because as someone said today in the hearings, this might be the first time in human history where genocide is being recorded in real time. We have the evidence. We see what is happening, the massive devastation and destruction of Gaza, the people of Gaza, and also it exposes what they do in the West Bank as well to Palestinian people. So this is really important. Whether the United States and Israel actually abide by it, it could have bigger implications in terms of sanctions by other countries and other international relations.
Yeah, and just want to remind folks, that it's being reported that there are folks in Israel that are raising questions about what kind of victory in the Gaza war is even possible. And so some of the critiques that we're hearing here at home, are not all that different from some of the critiques that Israelis on the ground in Israel are beginning to say louder and louder.
And real quick, I just want to add one quick thing. We have to remember Netanyahu had some of the biggest anti-Netanyahu protests in the months preceding this. So to your point, yes, there are a lot of people who live in Israel who are also not abiding by the Israeli government's policies.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time. I'm guest host Dr. Nicordelai Corte with Dr. Calvin John Smiley and Dr. Niambi Carter. We're going to be digging deeper into today's headlines when we come forward right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
There are many things to love about winter: cozy sweaters, celebrations, and family time. But winter can also bring many stressors, extra expenses, seasonal bugs, and so much family time. If you and your loved ones are feeling stressed or anxious this winter,
these are not easy.
CalHope can help. Check out our free mental health resource at calhope.org today.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste, so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Appreciate the questions and also not shying away from some of the tougher aspects of it.
Only the Sleep Number Smart Bed lets you each choose your individual firmness and comfort of your sleep number setting. The Climate 360 Smart Bed is so smart.
That's right.
Actively cools or warms up to 13 degrees on either side. Ideal sleep temperature.
We
the
know
Queen
it.
Sleep Number C2 Smart Bed is now only $9.90. Plus free home delivery when you add any base. Ends Monday. Prices higher in Alaska and Hawaii. To find a store near you, visit sleepnumber.com.
KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Thea Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org.
They're posting your stuff up, the name.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
it. From KBLA Talk 1580.
The way we spend our
You are listening to Areva Martin in real time. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte here with Dr. Niambi Carter and Dr. Calvin John Smiley, and we are digging deeper into today's headlines and biggest stories. One of the big stories right now looks like former President Donald Trump is big mad. Not a little bit mad. He is big mad. Donald J. Trump civil fraud trial, it enters its final phase today as each side presents their closing arguments in a case that has enraged the former president and threatens his family business. Lawyers from the New York Attorney General, who sued Mr. Trump in 2022, they've argued that the former president violated state laws by seriously exaggerating his net worth to obtain favorable loans. I mean, he's being sued to the tune of $370 million. That's no pocket change for anybody. Any predictions here, Dr. Carter, in terms of what may result in the final verdict of this case?
I would say, as a political scientist by training, it's always the money that gets people. It's usually never the other things that we think get people. So I'm thinking guilty could be possible because you're talking about fraud, right? Overvaluing these resources to get these monies that you don't really have. If you or I did that in any capacity, right? Not even on that scale, that's a crime. Because one of the things we have to do is sign these documents acknowledging that everything that's here is faithfully presented, right? And that we are telling the truth. And Donald Trump allegedly hasn't told the truth, overinflating numbers and doing all of this. And now let's be clear, he's always been alleged to engage in behavior that was not above board. These were allegations. But now that we've seen testimony after testimony, I think a guilty could be possible. I know he tried to set the stage because I think he does think he might be found guilty for that guilty verdict to be called into question, right? With those closing arguments and what he wanted to say and what he did say, he accused the judge of having an agenda. I don't think that's a great idea, right? But I think he's doing what he did with the election. Donald Trump never takes a no, right? He always takes that repudiation and he turns it into something else. He's called it a witch hunt. He's called it political. Even though the judge gave him very specific guidelines about what he could and could not say, he still went to that same language of this is all a lie. These people are trying to get me because he's so important, right? And to his followers, everything he says is absolutely true. So I have no doubt that he thinks there is a very good chance that he might be found guilty. I think he's potentially going to be found guilty on these financial crimes.
Dr. Smiley, any predictions on what the verdict might be, at least given the evidence that's been reported widely? And I've also got to ask you, what is his behavior, his latest behavior? I mean, really going off on the judge in court. What does it say about the power, the omnipotence of white supremacy?
Yeah, I mean, the fraud charges are the ones that might stick. I think we've seen, and this is not a criticism, but there has been a kind of like, let's throw as many darts as we can because we know they're not all going to stick, and maybe this is the one that can stick. I think Donald Trump and his team probably already have a plan B, C, and D if it doesn't go their way, of who they're going to appeal to, both in terms of courts as well as in the kind of court of public opinion to try to put pressure. In terms of your question about him going after the judge, he constantly throws these dog whistles out there, which put people's lives, frankly, in danger. Whether that was when he was talking about the Proud Boys and told them that ominous phrase, "Stand up and stand back," or "Stand by and stand back," excuse me, or going after the judge here. There seems to be this kind of pressure that he wants to cook up that he hopes that will either cripple or stifle his adversaries. And its relationship to white supremacy is the nature of white supremacy, is to subjugate and oppress as well as exploit those who are not you and to do your bidding. And so, I think a lot of people often give Donald Trump way too much credit as this kind of expert genius, whatever. All he really does is he takes pages out of history and has simply did a rerun and did it over again. So, if we want to get rid of Donald Trump, right, going back to our question around Trumpism, is that we need to then have a real conversation of how do we get rid of white supremacy. And I don't think that is a conversation that we truly want to have as a nation yet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in our remaining minute, I want to ask you all about this. The House majority is kicking off the new year by aggressively advancing existing impeachment inquiries for President Joe Biden, but they're not stopping there. They're going after Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. They're going after Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and they are still holding up aid to Ukraine and Israel in exchange for some sort of border security package. In about 30 seconds each, heads or tails, it's going to backfire on Republicans. Are Republicans going to pay a hefty price up and down the ballot or not? Dr. Carter?
It's hard to know. I mean, I think the other things that might cost him are things like abortion and all these other things that we've seen in Texas and these very conservative places, and these stories that are coming out of Indiana and all these places where these women are saying their lives are in danger, their fertility. I think those might actually do more than these other issues. But I think you're right. This do nothing Congress and this attempt to just obstruct is going to test people's patience eventually. And I think it's hard to know. This is a fickle public, and if 91 indictments can't get him, I'm not sure this will do it. But certainly this looks like a mess. I don't think this is worthwhile. I don't think it's worth the fight. And I think Mike Johnson knows it. And if he can't get his caucus together, he's in trouble, right?
And in 20 seconds, Dr. Smiley?
Statistically, it's in Joe Biden's favor to win re-election. There's only been, 2 in the last 40 some odd years who've not won re-election, Trump and George H. Bush. But, Biden needs to get it together and tighten up a bit, hear some of the young folks' concerns about international crises, and get with the program. So, I'm not sure either.
We'll have to leave it right there. My thanks to Dr. Niambi Carter and Dr. Calvin John Smiley. You've been listening to Areva Martin in Real Time. I'm guest host Dr. Nicolai Corte. And guess what? Next hour, Areva Martin right here, right now, in this seat. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward.
Thank y'all.
Bye-bye now.
Excellent
Good night.
job.
Happy New Year. Good to see you. Take care.
All right. Take care.